is your host, Susan Regan.
Hello, I'm Susan Patricelli Regan. I am the host of Connecticut Valley Views. And my guests today are Bill Mazzano and David Holman. And I first met Bill actually. He was on the Lee Elsey show, and we talked a little bit. We talked about a lot of things that are important to him in Guilford. He ran for the Board of Education. And I'm going to let you give his background and some of the experiences he had in dealing with that Board of Education in Guilford. And then he introduced me to David Holman. And I think you're going to hear some very interesting information with regard to our children, the issues they faced, some concerns that they have with regard to how Connecticut is being run. And I think it will be important to all parents out there to listen to this and perhaps give you the opportunity to speak up. So some demographics on Guilford. Population's been pretty steady at 22,000. Median age is about 48. White collar, 88%. Blue collar, 12%. Household with children, 29%. Household without children, 71%. Median income, 112,000. Housing median value, the housing median value with a mortgage is 414,200, and a housing median value without a mortgage, 381,600. That's just to give you a snapshot picture. And so, Bill, I'd like to have you speak and give a little background on yourself, as much family information you'd like to share, and your experience with the Board of Education.
Yeah, well, I am a lifelong Guilford resident. The only time I haven't lived in Guilford was my 4 years serving in the Air Force, which I did right after high school. And then I went to college after that. I went to Southern Connecticut and got my degree in special education and got my teaching certification. So I've always had a strong interest in promoting the welfare of children and seeing them succeed. As things turned out, I really wanted to teach in Guilford, but there weren't any openings at the time. And I had a friend on the Guilford Police Department, and he said, "Why don't you apply?" And I needed a job. And I was actually an SP in the Air Force, which is the Army equivalent of an MP. So I did have some police experience. And, you know, it's funny the way God works. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I applied, and they started a new program called DARE, Drug Abuse Resistance Education. And I was like a natural fit for it. And so I spent the majority of my time as a member of the police department teaching in the schools the DARE program, which was terrific because there was a strong focus on making good choices and the consequences of your choices, because no matter what you decide, there's going to be a consequence, good or bad. And if you decide to do nothing, there's still going to be a consequence. So it was highly effective, and the best years of my life. I felt like I came home every day and made a little bit of a difference. And then things started to change after I left the department. It was due to an injury. I was there 25 years, but I was injured. And
that's a long tenure. That's quite a tenure.
It was. Yeah, it was. I'd probably still be there. Anyway, I started noticing with my own kids some of the assignments that were coming home, because my wife and I are very involved in our children's education.
Yes.
We're also devout Christians, and some of the assignments didn't align with some of my personal beliefs, especially when it came to sex education classes. I felt that I would be the appropriate person to teach those values to my children. I addressed the Board of Ed about it very politely, and was surprised when I met with resistance. I didn't think I was really asking a lot. It seemed reasonable to me to want to teach morality to my own children.
Of
I
course.
feel that I'm better equipped to do that than any teacher. We probably don't share the same values, but it just never worked that way. So I ran for the Board of Ed, and everybody in Guilford knows me. They know who I am.
Hmm.
They know my values, and I've
Did
never
you
been.
have, yeah, did you have a group of people who were backing you up? Did you feel other parents felt the same way? Did they feel like they could speak up?
They didn't feel like they could speak up. There's
I
a
see.
small group with the courage to do that because you will get attacked.
Okay.
I'm one of those people like you. I'm fine with being attacked. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Right. Right.
It's just not okay to attack my family or children.
Yes.
That crosses the line. But I've never been attacked so viciously in my life for just having a different opinion on things. And it wasn't like I wanted to take anything away from any other parent.
Mhm.
If they want to have their children at home, those are their kids. They can teach them whatever values they choose to teach them. I just was asking for the same respect.
All right, let me ask you a question here. In what context did that happen? In other words, normally when we think about education and teaching our children and so forth, and they go to school to learn, the reading, writing, and arithmetic. So where did this fit into the curriculum? Was it an elective that they could choose to take, or where did that fit within the daily schedule of school? Was this a daily thing, a weekly thing?
Oh, that's actually a great question because it was a weekly thing for a while. They do not have health all year, but he was learning about pronouns, which we don't use in my home. If people care to use them, that's fine. But he actually didn't even know what they were talking about when he was asked to give his pronouns.
I see.
So he was confused. He learned about alternative sexual choices, homosexuality, things that we don't have a problem with personally, and would never, look at somebody in a disrespectful manner for their belief. But as far as my son is concerned, if he has a question about that, I would prefer to be the one to speak to him.
Okay, let me let Dave chime in here. Now, Dave, please, a little background on you and how you know Bill and your thoughts on this subject.
Sure. I'm 68 years old. I grew up in East Haven. I went to high school in West Haven at Notre Dame High School. Then I went to college in Texas, a place called Texas Christian University. It's in Fort Worth. When I graduated, I came back home. I got a job in New Jersey for U.S. Steel. I was down there for 8 years until they closed the sales office I was working in, and I came back to Connecticut. And I've been in sales for plumbing supplies, heating supplies, pipe valves, and fittings until 2018, December, when I retired. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. I've been taking my dog for walks every day. He's a yellow lab. His name is Bumbles. And one day I was walking my dog in my neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood called Sunrise. Quiet streets, no through streets. So there were kids in the road making chalk drawings. Little kids, I'd say first, second grade.
Okay.
And when I got close, I saw what they were drawing. Black Lives Matter, hands up, don't shoot, I can't breathe, equal pay. I was shocked. Quite frankly, I was shocked. So I went home and I called the first selectman in town and I said, I want to volunteer to review the textbooks we're using in school. I figured they were getting this stuff from school.
Okay, all right.
And he said, you have to talk to the school superintendent. I ended up having an email conversation with him.
Okay.
I asked him specifically if we were teaching critical race theory or 1619 theory in school. I also asked him if we were using any Black Lives Matter textbooks in school. So the answers I got were shocking. He said to me, he said, we're not teaching critical race theory or 1619 theory per se, but I consider them both valuable approaches to teaching American history. As far as Black Lives Matter texts are concerned, he said, I have bought Waking Up White and White Fragility for our leadership team. And I bought 300 copies of Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist for every single teacher in the district. I was shocked. So I started.
And this just came out of the old budget, the old educational budget.
That was our taxpayer money.
Right,
$6,000 to buy those texts.
All right.
And they weren't approved by the Board of Education either.
Oh.
He just did it on his own. But the Board of Education completely backs him, and they issued a statement last April where they're in 100% support of his. He doesn't call it critical race theory. He calls it equity and social justice initiative. Just another word for critical race theory. So I'm very concerned about it. There was to me, critical race theory is teaching our kids to hate their country and also hate themselves, and to actually become racist. That one of the things they don't believe in is they don't believe in Martin Luther King's philosophy of being colorblind. They want everything to be race conscious, and I'm doing my best to stop it.
All right. Well, okay. So do you feel that this is being driven by a national trend? We have obviously a majority in the legislature in Connecticut, but do you feel this is trickled down on a national basis from the Biden, perhaps Obama, perhaps Soros? We don't know exactly where this is stemming from, but do you feel it's being driven down and that people are concerned about their jobs if they don't go along with it? Or do you feel that the people are actually seriously concerned and they're being made to feel guilty, so therefore they take on that responsibility?
All of that.
Okay.
All of that.
All right. Now, with regard to critical race theory, when parents are concerned either about the sexual curriculum, the CRT, the Black Lives Matter. Now, the Black Lives Matter that you said those young children were drawing on the pavement, what I see is there is Black Lives Matter, but it should be all lives matter. Do you agree with me?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if that were the case, unfortunately, what it appears is that they use that as a front, as an excuse for violence. Would you say that's true? They try to make people feel guilty with regard to, you don't care about us. And then on the other hand, it ends up being violence of some kind. Now, we know that violence is disruptive in the classroom. We know that not listening. Now, I kind of want to tie this back actually into Bill's comment about being a policeman for 25 years. Did you see this when you left? Did you see any of this type of growth, Bill, of this type of attitude when you left? You were dealing with drugs program and so forth. But did you see this starting to creep in then? And how long ago was it that you actually retired from that job?
Oh, I retired about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And no, I actually didn't see anything. The Guilford school system was terrific. When I noticed a really big
change. Was it the George Floyd thing? Would you say that was the catalyst?
Like you were reading my mind, yes.
Okay.
It seemed like this was something in the making for quite some time. And then George Floyd, unfortunately, was the spark that set everything off. Mm-hmm. As a police officer, when I saw that video, I was appalled. Mm-hmm. Like most police officers, I think the whole country was. Mm-hmm. And it just got so out of control but I think were people who wanted it to go that way, wanted the chaos, wanted us to be divided, unfortunately. And it was just so sad to see. I think in Guilford, there's a lot of virtue signaling. People will put out their Black Lives Matter lawn sign, or I support the Board of Education and Diversity, or slap a bumper sticker on. And, you know, somehow I think it makes them feel more virtuous and like they're doing something when they're actually not.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not making any positive change, but I guess it makes them feel better that they do that.
Now,
And-
this brings on another thing, because when you have the adults, the parents who are accepting this on the Board of Education, perhaps they don't speak up at the meetings and so forth, and then this filters down to the children, does that not now put, well, let's say for the sake of discussion, the white children at harm if they don't go along? I mean, this is going to incur a situation where if you have young children who are white and they say, well, I think all lives matter. Have you seen anything where there's been physical harm because of this stance?
Sadly, I have.
Mentally,
Yes.
perhaps, emotionally?
Mentally, physically, you name it, it's happened. It's very sad. And it's not just the white children. It's anybody who has a different opinion.
Has a different opinion.
Personally, I feel very bad for the minority children because they're kind of singled out in this. They're no different than any children here. They just want to play with their friends and, you know, be treated equally. And that's the way it's always been in Guilford. And now, suddenly, with this focus on diversity, it's had like the opposite effect. Things have become tribal. It's almost like you're with us or against us. And
do you think it'll lead to some sort of civil war? Do you see that as becoming a possibility?
I don't think so. I think cooler heads will prevail. I know myself, all I'm looking for is a dialogue and for people to be as respectful of my values as I am of theirs. That's all I ask.
Right. So what we need is some educational reform here. And I know that the Board of Education people are elected. Would you see the possibility going forward of changing the dynamics of the Board of Education, where there needs to be at least one person representing the independent or unaffiliated, if you will, and a certain number of Democrats and a certain number of Republicans? Could you see those dynamics changing?
Not only could I see them changing, I pray that they will. In Guilford, we have no Republican representation. Almost through the entire town. I believe there's 2 Republicans on any board, and the Board of Education has 0. So even if we could get one voice, that would make a huge difference. Just somebody to maybe have some different ideas, because you're never going to gain any sort of consensus. It just kind of keeps playing out. I mean, on the local level and the state level, it seems like more of the same over and over.
Well, what I see is that going forward, there will not be a true picture of what the United States or patriotism or all the good things that we've done with democracy in this country and what we've stood for. So they won't really have that. Well, let me ask you a couple other things and your thoughts, both of you gentlemen, with regard to priorities of importance in your town. Obviously, this is one of them. Taxes, mandates, obviously the masking in school. What do you see as what are some of the major priorities that you'd like to see changed?
Okay, did you want to go first, Dave?
Yeah, Dave.
Sure, I could go first. The critical race theory issue is the biggest issue in town. We had here in Guilford had the largest turnout of any town in the entire state in the last election. It was 62% turnout. It is an issue. The problem is most people in town don't even know what it is and how it's being implemented in our school system. We have to educate people as to what it is and the dangers of it. You also mentioned, how do we change things? Well, we had Republicans on the Board of Education per minority rule before. That there were 4 of them, okay. 4 out of the 9, and they worked in lockstep with the Democrats. They were in total favor of the superintendent's equity and social justice initiative. That there was literally no difference. And I'd like to read you a couple of things here.
Yes, please do.
During the election, and Bill can attest to this, the teachers union sent out a survey to all of the candidates. And these were 2 questions on the survey. Will you pledge to include the local teachers union in discussions surrounding all matters related to your local school district, its schools, and its functions, its funding, rather? And the second question was, will you oppose all proposals that would censor teachers from teaching about inclusion, diversity, and equity? These are euphemisms for critical race theory.
Yes.
It is quite stunning. So they're working in lockstep together. There is no opposition here, and it's a problem. And I see the only way to get around this is to educate the public, quite frankly.
Which is what we're doing here today. And I hope what we are doing here is, I don't think that we are opposing the idea. I think America has always stood for the American dream, and that American dream should be whatever the individual would like or hope to do. And some people start out at a different place in life. Some people have more advantages. But I think what we're doing is we are simply taking, similar to when women were saying that there was not enough money being spent on their athletic programs and colleges and so forth. And so Title IX came in, and they changed the equivalency on that, and more money was spent, and uniforms and so forth. And I think, and now it has gone so far that they feel that the turnaround, or the equating it, is to now have men who are transgendered participating in women's sports. It's kind of, once you bend that tree too far to the right, in order to straighten it up, you've got to bend it all the way over to the other side. And I think rather than opposing each other, we have to take apart the definition of critical race theory to see what their objective is. I think that needs to be asked. What is your objective? Is it to make people, because this generation and the past, I would say, past 10 years, 10 decades of people are not responsible for the injurious things that happened to African American people 150 years ago. And to lay that blame on them is not appropriate. So perhaps the discussion to have is, tell us what your definition of critical race theory is, and how that would apply, that would be equal to white children or Hispanic children or other than African American. Would you say that's a possibility? Are they willing to discuss it?
I can tell you with 100% certainty that they are not willing to discuss it. They think they know better than we do. They think that what they're doing is absolutely correct. That they are true believers in this stuff. And in Guilford, they had a professor of critical race theory from Quinnipiac University come and speak to the Human Rights Commission, and they opened it up to the public in a Zoom meeting.
Yes.
And she defined critical race theory she said there's three things that critical race theory scholars all agree on. The first is that critical race theory, racism is man-made. It's a man-made construct. In other words, it's institutional. That means that all our institutions are illegitimate and they have to be gotten rid of. The second thing she said was it's systemic.
Yeah.
We are, if you're white, you were born racist, all right? And the third thing they said is that they don't believe in Dr. Martin Luther King's view of a colorblind society. Everything has to be race conscious. When you look at somebody, the first thing you see is their race, and you look for systemic racism in every conversation, every interaction, every subject in school. This is what they believe.
Well, if we were to have a change in leadership, which is a ways off with regard to the presidency, I think we've got another 3 years or so to go with Biden and Harris. Do you think that a change at the top would make a difference with regard to these issues?
Absolutely. President Trump, when he was president, he outlawed the teaching of critical race theory in every department in our federal government, in our military institutions, and he was trying to get rid of it in our school systems. Yes, it would make a tremendous difference.
Your thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah, I think it would. I look at things I can control more. I'm one vote in the big scheme of presidential election, but I really feel like if I focus my energies on local things, that's where true change really begins. They say all politics is local.
Right.
So I look at Guilford and then I look at our state.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the real change will come from.
Well, gentlemen, yeah, this has been a very interesting discussion, and I think that we might want to check back in with you at a later date and have both of you on again, or perhaps if you have someone else who'd like to speak up. But I want to thank you today for being as candid as you have been. I think it's a very important subject, protecting our children, all children. And I very much appreciate it and enjoyed having Bill Mazzano and David Holman on our show. I want to remind all of our viewers that you can see all of our programs on ctvalleyviews.com. This is Susan Patricelli Regan. Thank you for joining us today.